It's criminal defense attorney Ryan Pacyga, and today I will answer a question sometimes I get calls about, and that is it really worth or do I need to have a lawyer for a bail hearing? So let's go through what that would mean. That would mean somebody's been arrested as opposed to being mailed a court date, right? Someone gets arrested and they're already charged or they're about to be charged, and then they're sitting in jail, they've been charged, and now they're in front of a judge or going to be in front of a judge for what's called a bail hearing, okay? And I'll be very honest. I believe in being transparent with people about these things. Sometimes, whether you hire a lawyer or not, it's not going to affect what amount gets set on at bail, right? The court will usually appoint someone a public defender. Even if they don't qualify for a public defender later in the case, they'll at least have sometimes a public defender there doing the bail hearings or first appearances, they're called for people, okay? And sometimes, whether you have a paid lawyer or a public defender there, it's not going to change what the judge sets for bail. So it doesn't always pay necessarily to have a lawyer that early in the case. But other times it does make a difference. I'll give you an example today, okay? So public defenders, they're the busiest lawyers that there are. And that's because anytime someone qualifies for a public defender and doesn't have the money, the courts will just keep assigning cases to the public defenders. And every public defender in the country will tell you that they've got too many cases to handle, right? That's just the way that our system is kind of broken that way. Prosecutors usually aren't responsible for as many cases at any given time as a public defender is. Private lawyers, those lawyers for hire, other than the really, really low-fee lawyers whose business model is get as many cases as they can because they're low fees. So you got to have a lot of cases to make money. Think of that almost like a fast food restaurant that sells cheaper hamburgers, right? They might not make any less money than a restaurant that sells more expensive hamburgers because they might sell 1,000 hamburgers in a day versus a more expensive restaurant might sell 100 in a day, right? They might both end up making the same money at the end of the day, but the business models are very different. So low-fee lawyers have to have a whole lot of clients in order to kind of make enough money to keep going. And public defenders can't say no to their caseload, unfortunately. So a lot of times they have way more clients than they can ever handle. And the result of that is sometimes they don't get to spend the time that they wish they could spend with the people that they're appointed to represent before a hearing or many times meet with them or even really sometimes to prepare for a trial, unfortunately. And it's often not because they don't care, but because they simply have way too much work to do and they don't have time to spend on a case that they wish they did, right? So we got hired to represent a guy that got arrested. It was pretty quick. He got arrested. And because I had had an opportunity to talk with him at length right before that arrest, when he did get arrested and charged, I was prepared to argue at the bail hearing, and here's what happened today. So back a month ago, law enforcement had called for this guy, hearing that he had committed a series of crimes, and they wanted to interview him. And he hired me right away, and I called law enforcement, and I told them, I left a message saying, hey, I've been hired to represent him. I know you want to interview him. Give me a call. We can talk about it, right? The officer took 3 weeks to give me 2.5 weeks to give me a call back, which isn't sometimes happens. It shouldn't happen that way, but it did, right? So 2.5 weeks later, I get this call from this officer apologizing that he never called me back, and he calls back. And then he says, well, I'm not on the case anymore. I was just the initial officer. We've got a detective on it. I'll tell the detective you called. I'll give him your info, and I'll have him give you a call. Well, the detective never called. That was at the end of last week, right? Guess what? Over a holiday weekend, they surrounded our client after his ex-wife called him to go to the house. She kind of set him up that way. And they surround him, AR-15s drawn on him and everything like that. And they arrest him on a holiday weekend, which is bad because that means courts aren't open on the holiday. So prosecutor at the bail hearing today argues for, I think it was $150,000 unconditional bail, which means no rules, or I think like $85,000 conditional bail, which means bail plus you got to follow a bunch of rules, right? And the judge, I could tell she was about ready to jump in and order that. And I said, hold on a minute. I want you to hear the rest of the story, Your Honor. And I told her about, hey, this guy had gotten us involved in the middle of October. I immediately called police the day I got hired, told them I'm going to be representing him, gave me a call back. They took 2.5 weeks to call back. And then this officer said, I can't talk to you about it. There's a detective now. And the detective never called back, and instead they just go arrest the guy. So the prosecutor was arguing it's a serious crime, and one of the two things that judges can think about is, number one, should they set bail if someone's a flight risk? Okay, like they might not come to court or they might leave the state or something. And then second, are they a danger to the public? Okay. I was telling the judge, this guy's not a flight risk. He's lived here his whole life, and he had hired us even before he got charged. So he's got a lawyer in place. He ain't going anywhere. And in fact, when they arrested him, he was still here. So he wasn't leaving. And then in terms of the danger to the public, this alleged crime that had occurred was a few years ago. It was reported recently. And even according to the prosecutor's version of the case, the criminal activity had stopped a couple years ago. So I was saying, well, he's not really a danger to the public anymore, even under their own allegations. This isn't an ongoing crime that's happening now. They even said it stopped, a couple of years ago. And so I was able to point that out and point out that what they should have done, given that he wasn't fleeing and everything like that, is they should have just called us back, number one. Number two, they should have told the judge that if they were going to do this arrest on a warrant, that they would have just they could have just mailed him a court date instead. And third, that he had a lawyer, and this lawyer was in communication with the police about it. They didn't tell the judge any of that. Well, that made a big difference to the judge. I was also able to point out some good facts about him, about his military history and things like that. And so the judge greatly reduced the conditional bail, I think down to $25,000, which means in Minnesota here he's got to put up 10% of that to a bond company, or $2,500, rather than it would have been, I think, the $85,000 conditional, which would have been $8,500 if it's 10% to a bond company. So they just saved $6,000 already in money that you don't get back from a bond company, by the way. They keep that. So by having a lawyer before the bail hearing, right, and hiring early in this particular situation, we were able to save that family $6,000. I've had other cases, of course, where because we're prepared for a bail hearing, we get no bail for someone as opposed to someone having to pay bail, or have saved sometimes hundreds of thousands in bail at having effective bail arguments as well. So sometimes it doesn't make any difference whether you hire a lawyer before a bail hearing or wait until after that. Other times it can make a difference. There's no way to predict that 100%. But I just like educating people about the law and how that works. And they're having a lawyer that's prepared and that knows the background of it prior to going into a bail hearing can make a big difference about whether someone has to post any bail at all, or certainly what the amount of that is. So we're happy to say he was able to post bond today and is out. And because of that, he's also able to keep his job. Had he sat in jail a couple more days, or the bail been high enough where he couldn't make it, he would have lost his job as well, and then that creates a whole nother set of problems for people. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea about whether you should hire a lawyer before a bail hearing or not. The last tip I'll give you is just talk to some lawyers about it and go with your gut about who you think's really being honest to you. Watch out for people over-promising you things or telling you what you want to hear to get your money. That's not a good thing. So just trust your gut on that sort of thing and look for a lawyer who's going to be transparent with you from the start. I recommend that. I'm criminal defense attorney Ryan Pacyga. If you have any questions, you can reach me at 612-339-5844 or find me at arrestedmn.com. And if you like the video, if you think it's helpful, maybe subscribe to my channel or at least give it a like or send some comments and let me know I'm doing what you guys want out there. Take care.